So for us, there's no reason to eliminate aspects that make it safe. And so that's what we've been laser focused on, is what is the safest path to doing this. Now, we're the only company that starting October of 2020 removed the driver. And so there's probably a lot of ways it can be done, but we're the only ones that have done it. And we've been doing it 24 hours a day for almost 5 years. And so to us, it's really important to focus on safety, not to focus on safety and then cost, not cost and then safety.
So does that mean that you think Tesla's focusing on cost and then safety? It's taking a back seat perhaps? What makes you believe that maybe their strategy with no LiDARs is less safe today?
I think that it's less of a focus on them and more of a focus on what we've learned, which is that you have to be able to see at night. You have to be able to have this vision that's better than humans, right? Like what we're doing is we're replacing humans. We're not asking you to sit behind the wheel and take over the vehicle at a really vulnerable moment.
Right.
Instead, we're inviting you to sit in the back seat, relax and unwind, and get safely to your destination. That's a very different value proposition, but it's one that requires belts and suspenders, and that's the approach that we've taken.
Right, and I mean, I've been covering the industry for a long time. I saw what happened with Uber when it ran into its issues, saw what happened with Cruise. Are you worried that as Tesla rolls out and maybe they're putting cost ahead of safety, are you worried that there could be an accident that sets the whole industry, the autonomous industry, back?
I think in the early days of a nascent technology, like having a healthy worry about how it takes a long time to earn trust, and it doesn't take that long to lose it.
Absolutely.
And so, of course, with everyone, we want all competitors to enter this space focused on safety. Like, that's the only reason it's worth it. Can your technology make the road safer for humans? Yes or no? And so, of course, we have a healthy worry about that, no matter who the company is. But that's because there can always be an overreaction by regulators. Like, their job is to protect the public. This is part of why we have the safety hub. We think it's our job to make clear that our technology is unique to Waymo. It's developed, designed, assembled here in the US, and it's proprietary to us, and no one else has it, and we put our safety stats out there.
Right.
And so transparency mixed with safety, mixed with years and years of experience, ultimately should be enough, but yeah, it makes us worried.
People actually riding in the cars. We talked about this before, right? There's actually probably no better test. I know that living in San Francisco, someone gets in, they may be very nervous, but they're quickly sort of see it for themselves. It's interesting that Tesla's going to start with just 10 to 15 robotaxis, right? But Elon Musk, he just said that he anticipates having 1,000 or thousands of autonomous Teslas on the roads by year end. Is it possible that they're going to have more on the road than Waymos? There's going to be more Tesla robotaxis than Waymos by the end of this year?
I think it's, of course, possible. I think it's sort of an interesting question around business model. Like, I think if you thought about ride hailing before we launched, there are so many more ride hailing vehicles on the road than Waymos. But Waymo's doing one thing. It's carrying riders autonomously. So it's not how many cars do you have, it's how well are they utilized with paying riders, and how safe are you making the roads. And so for us, after 50 million miles, being able to look at the data and say that, okay, we've been able to have a reduction of over 80% of airbag crashes and injury causing crashes, like that's what we care about. And so, yeah, maybe there's more running around in cities, but that's not what we think is most important.
Does that drive urgency on your end then? It sounds like you sort of are on your own path. Does what Tesla does or launches, or how many cars they have on the road, affect what you do? Does it create more urgency for you to look to a different business model that includes a Zeekr fleet, that includes Toyotas? How many cars do you anticipate will be on the road doing Waymo commercial rides by the end of this year?
I think for us, the urgency is the state of our roads. Over 1.3 million people being killed globally on the roads. It should be urgent for all of us to use technology to address that. Like, we're not satisfied with the status quo. There's a lot of companies sort of focused on this. That's not what creates urgency for us.
Right.
The opportunity for the Waymo driver to be deployed and for roads to be made safer is what creates that urgency. And now that we have tens of thousands of riders taking rides every day, the other urgency for us that's created is they have family members that live in other states that we're not offering the service in. And those states and those countries are asking Waymo, like, when are you coming?
Right.
Like, we're interested in you coming. And so there's a excitement that's happening. There's a realization that this is real. And then there's actually places asking us to come sooner. All of that creates urgency for us.
So Elon Musk, he says that Waymo's approach doesn't scale because it relies, we talked about this, on expensive hardware, city by city, sort of mapping and basis. When can we expect to see, I know you guys are planning a new fleet, lower cost with Zeekr. When can we expect that?
Our Zeekr vehicles are testing now. And then we've already announced that we have a partnership with Hyundai to do the Ioniq 5, so that'll follow. And then we just announced the partnership with Toyota. You know, for us, it's really important to think about, we're building a generalizable driver,
right,
and we've had that driver across multiple vehicle platforms. And so you're gonna see us continue to do that.
Right.
You know, the reason that's so exciting to us is, you know, we're starting with ride hailing, but once you have a generalizable driver, you can do, you know, we have a redundant platform with Daimler Trucks. We've done local delivery, you know, partnerships and pilots. And then we are in conversations with Toyota about personally owned cars. And so we really think about this as how to make sure that ride hailing is advancing the Waymo driver so that it becomes generalizable across a host of business models.
I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the Toyota partnership because it did introduce this idea that I think a lot of investors thought Waymo had the edge on, but personal ownership, which is something that Waymo, you talk about the Waymo driver, has had in its sights already for many years. How's that going? And how do you think about that? Do you think that ultimately does the model look more like Uber, a ride-sharing platform, or more like a personal ownership, what Tesla and Elon Musk believe will happen?
I think that what I've learned is automotive companies are very interested in, at some point, having access to the Waymo driver. And so we're interested in making sure that it's available. And the Toyota partnership represented sort of preliminary discussions to explore that. And think about it as like marrying their like manufacturing and scale prowess with our technological prowess.
So in the future, whenever that is, do people have their own self-driving cars in their driveways?
Yes, people can purchase a vehicle directly from an automotive company. Or you could imagine a future where automotive companies actually decide that they're going to manage fleets of vehicles. So that's a little bit of a business model question for them, but certainly we want to make the technology available for them.
Right. So you're laying the groundwork for cities beyond the Sun Belt, which makes me so happy because we were talking about how people on the East Coast in New York, they don't understand sort of the place that Waymo now plays in cities like San Francisco and LA. So you've got DC. What is the biggest obstacle for you? Is it technology? Is it regulation? Is it consumer trust?
I think trust is something we'll always think of as what we have to work hard at. You have to work hard to earn it and you can lose it fast. And the other thing that we're really focused on right now in Los Angeles, in Phoenix and San Francisco is freeways, right? Like there are many, many cities that will benefit from us having the ability to drive on freeways. And again, it's very different to put someone on a freeway behind the wheel and ask them to take over than inviting someone to sit in the back seat and enjoy the ride. Right. And so we are laser focused on making sure that our freeway experience delivers the experience, both safety and comfort that riders have come to expect.
What do you think the biggest misconception is for people, you know, who haven't been in a Waymo or a robotaxi?
I think one of the misconceptions, because we live in a world where people think in terms of whether they're driving or someone else is driving them, they're constantly thinking as a drivered vehicle. It's hard for people who haven't had a Waymo One experience to imagine sitting in the back seat or the passenger seat with an empty driver's seat,
right,
and imagine that as real and scaled. And that's the reason I think this 10 million rides is so exciting, because I think that'll start to make an impact in people's minds. Like, wait a minute, you know, this isn't science fiction and it's not the future, it's happening now. And it's not only happening in San Francisco where technology can sort of be perceived as quite advanced. It's also happening in Austin through the Uber partnership. It's happening in Los Angeles. It's happening in Phoenix. And soon it'll be in Atlanta and then Miami. And then, as you said, Washington, D.C. and then more cities to come.
Abroad, Tokyo even. I know you're testing there.
Yeah.
But regulation has been sort of part of it, right? If limiting a little bit on scale. Musk, he's calling for national regulations on self-driving technology. Would that be positive for the development of the industry at large?
Yeah, I think we are certainly focused on a national AV standard. We think that will help. Some of what you have to do at the state level relates to sort of regulating the driver. And so we think that's fine. But when you're focused on safety, we think that should be at the federal level. And President Trump and Secretary Duffy have both been very supportive of that. I think there's a recognition right now, given how dynamic this space is, that like now's the time to sort of make U.S. innovation a global leader in the autonomous vehicle space. And so I think creating this national standard, creating business certainty around this would be great.
Are you optimistic that gets done this year?
This term.
This term.
I'm optimistic that it gets done this term. And I say that because, I mean, the President Trump in the first administration was very focused on this too. And so this is a continuation, and I feel like now's the time.
And do you think part of that helping that narrative is what's been happening in China? We've seen a lot of advances. How do you view the Chinese robotaxi autonomous market compared to what we have here in the U.S.?
I think it's dynamic, it's growing, it's important, we should focus on it, and it has full government support. And so I think we should be in the exact same position. And I think from a consumer experience, consumers will decide, right? Like they'll look at the safety records, they'll understand who's delivering on the value proposition. But I really do think at the end of the day, it's becoming a much more global and dynamic space.
Is China caught up? Are they ahead?
It's hard to tell.
Very interesting. Let's talk a little bit about your partnership with Uber, partnering in
Austin
and Atlanta, excuse me.
Yeah.
Why not partner with Uber in more cities? Like Miami, you decided to go with Move for fleet management, but Uber can do that as well. Why are you guys kind of spreading out your bets with different partnerships?
Yeah, so we think of it as like, because we've been the first to remove the human driver, we've really needed to build an AV ecosystem. And so in Miami, we're going to have a fleet operating partner, but in Austin and Atlanta with Uber, we're really looking at them. They're a network operating partner. On day one, they have the demand.
Right.
And so that's really compelling for us. It gives us the chance for more people to have access to this technology. Fleet operating partners give us the chance to scale Waymo One directly to riders and for them to really get to know us directly. And so all of these business models are important for us to test out in the early days. It'll be fun to sort of have this conversation in 4 years on how it all kind of evolves. But right now, it's important for us to not go it alone. EV charging, vehicle integration, OEM partners, community partners, like we think of the ecosystem, and Uber is an important part of that.
How are you seeing then the trade-offs versus going alone with Waymo One in places like San Francisco and LA, where obviously you're going to get better margin? Maybe not better margin though. How are those finances working out? And what do you think will be the way forward? Do you see more partnerships or more Waymo One apps?
I think you'll see us continue to have fleet operating partners. We think that's important. It's also like, let everyone do what they're really good at. One of the biggest values of Uber is you have day one demand.
Right.
Obviously, we showed up in San Francisco and we had to build that. That's really valuable and important for us to know how to do, and we've demonstrated we can do it. And so now we can do it everywhere that we need to do it. And this is why we have these options.
Right. When you think about a city like New York, in San Francisco, you can understand, right? People are sort of early adopters. They're willing to take Waymo. But when you think about a New York, would you go in with a partner or a possibility that you do it on your own?
Undecided which way we'll go. But certainly New York is an incredibly important market from a regulatory perspective, from a consumer perspective. And so for us, it's like doing it in the way that ensures that the greatest number of people are able to access Waymo One. That's what we'll focus on.
Let's talk about Waymo within Alphabet, because I talk about this often, how, you know, and so do analysts on Wall Street. If Waymo was broken out as a separate company, might be valued way more. You look at what Tesla's valued at and what Waymo's valued at, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It feels underappreciated. Do you think there's a point, one is that maybe Waymo revenue at least will be broken out in the bigger Alphabet scheme?
I don't know. I'm not going to speculate on how they might decide to handle that. Obviously, you said it's a part of Alphabet, so those are Alphabet decisions. I do appreciate, though, the point that you're making, which is that as we've been able to build the Waymo driver and scale and demonstrate that this is a scalable technology that consumers will incorporate into their everyday lives, the value of what we've built is starting to become more clear.
Do you think if you were spun off from Alphabet, it would be easier to operate, easier to raise money, easier to scale?
I think it's been incredibly important to have the financial support of Alphabet. We've seen many, many companies not be able to make it to this point. I mean, this is a now 16-year journey, and not need to focus on cutting corners, right? Like that has been such a critical part. So I'm not in a hurry to fundraise without them. And at the same time, we are building something valuable to them and valuable to Waymo. And so I think we're all equally excited about the future. But
fair enough. Sort of lastly, I just want to talk a little bit again about the strategy between Tesla and Waymo. Tesla's seen as being AI first, but that's not entirely accurate because I know that Waymo's technology is also very much incorporating artificial intelligence, but you guys get kind of hit for relying on LiDARs. If AI camera mode proved to be just as safe, would you guys take that route? What are you seeing as that evolves?
So I think it's really important to think about, we started in 2009.
Yeah.
And so from 2009 to 2020, the reason we were able to remove the driver is because of the technology approach that we took. There's no other company that did it in that time frame. I think it's sort of tempting to imagine a world where we could have done it without LiDAR. It's just not our actual lived experience.
Right.
And so for us, it's important now we have a driver that's learned with that data. And so what we do in the future is a result of what we did in the past. It's not that we would be doing something different altogether. So right now we're not changing, but if we did change, it wouldn't necessarily mean that we could have skipped that step. It's a really important step.
Do you see a world in which you don't need LiDAR?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. Well, thank you so much, Deidre, for sitting down with us. Huge milestone. Thank you for bringing it to us, and excited to see the progress, the next 10 million trips.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam.
Yes, sir. I'm ready.
Okay, so for the uninitiated, you can blame me for that video, even though I loved it because I'm all over that kind of technology. But I thought it would be very interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, the co-CEO, Takidra, I think her name is. I'm only vaguely familiar with her, but she comes across as a very highly competent African American woman executive, and I always like to highlight that. The other thing is how fast technology is changing the world in which we live in, and all the discussions that I'm having about younger people in our community and how we can help them. I just think about how fast things are changing and the types of adaptations that we need to be talking to our young people about as far as the education level that they have. And I think most of them are keyed in on technology. At least they are keyed in on the parts that lead them to entertainment. And in many cases, those are the same pathways to technologies that create careers. So I think they have the capability of picking this stuff up very quickly. There are 500,000 unfilled, high-level, six-figure industrial / manufacturing jobs in the United States that are unfilled. That number will probably grow by 100,000 by the end of this year. And somewhere around 80% of them require a bachelor's degree. Not because a bachelor's degree makes you so much smarter than somebody else, but it's the information transfer and it's understanding the language. So I mean that's partly why I threw that in there. Now, on the more important things, One Adam, since he's the birthday man, today's his birthday, and full disclosure, he is a high muckety muck political figure in North Carolina, and he had the opportunity to speak at a political event over the weekend. I wanted him to give us an update on his presentation and just the overall event and how all that
Yes. I'm the president of the African American Caucus to the Cumberland County Democratic Party. And one of the other groups, the senior Democrats, sponsored a rally for democracy. And I was I was one of the people that had about 10 speakers to give a 5 to 7 minute address on democracy. And so I started doing my research. I went to Imam W. Muhammad Study Library, and I recommend everybody get a subscription to that. And I did a search on the word democracy. And the Imam gave several lectures on democracy and they had broken down. And this is not videos, it's written. These are written things. So, and really the lecture was Justice in Islam, how close are we Muslims to Western democracy? And several excerpts were on there. So the first one I went to, it talked about was really justice in Islam. Justice in Islam. And the man points out that Western democracy and Islamic democracy are close, but where it's not as close as when you deal in a situation where there's no justice. Justice is like the glue that holds democracy together. And the problem with Western democracy, that tends to be not to be just. And we can bear witness to that of 400 years of slavery and Jim Crowism and all the other stuff we had in it. There's no justice. So what you see now, when you have Republicans that are saying that they're fighting for American democracy, and then you have Democrats saying we're fighting for American democracy, but in reality they're fighting each other. There seems to be a breakdown in that. And how can both uphold something that they're fighting against? And so I wanted to touch on justice as important for democracy. And then the speaker before me was from the NAACP, and she went overboard to say that she's nonpartisan. And I came behind that and I said, well, I'm partisan, but not in the way that you're thinking. Because I showed in Cumberland County anyway, that at one point in time, the Democrats and the Republicans were like arrows shot from the same bow when it comes to us as a people, as African Americans. When I first moved to Cumberland County, or Fayetteville, North Carolina, and I would go to a meeting every Monday morning with African American activists. in the first half an hour of the meeting, all I could hear was the white man was this, the white man was that, you know? And then I found out that in 1984, there were really not that many Republicans in public office, especially in city and county office. At least at least they say they were Democrats. So if they're talking about the white man, it must be those racist Democrats who've been talking to you. And I said that, you know. And again, saying we had to bring justice back into the environment to save the democracy. And then I closed out reading a quote from President Ibrahim Traore. And said, and a lot of people say that his speeches are AI. And they probably are. They're AI. But the more I listen to his speeches, I think the AI means African intelligence more than artificial intelligence, because it appealed to me. And I read the speech where it says that when the colonialists have gone, and when the soldiers have gone, right? But they give us education which teaches us to hate ourselves and be enemies with each other. And I'm paraphrasing, I don't have to read. Though they have gone, they have not left. They've just moved up into your mind. I think that's it, right? That's about right, brother Talibin? Talibin still here?
Yeah.
I think that's
I'm sorry.
They have not left. They've just moved up into your mind.
Yes, sir. That was close.
Close enough, right?
You just said it, and it moved me again.
And it moved the audience, brother. It moved the audience. They like that part of it, especially because we're dealing with some of the same issues in Cumberland County, in Fayetteville, Cumberland County. Caucasian ain't in the meeting with us, but then again, he is. He's residing in the minds of most of those Negroes there that are fighting each other and are acting against each other's best interests. So that was basically it. And the thing about it, wasn't that many people there. Wasn't that many people there. And the organizer of it was concerned when he first got there. There were no Caucasians there. And he said, I was going to invite some, but I don't know which ones I can trust. That was his concern. So you had a retired, I don't know what his rank was, but anyway, Caucasian came. He was there by the time we started. He's running for Congress, and he spoke. And the way he bought both barrels. I said, I told the organizer, I said, God, I guess God heard your plea, and He sent one to represent, and He did. So that was basically what I did, and I didn't know I was invited the day before. I didn't know I was speaking. One of the persons that I know, she used to be the chairman of the Cumberland County Democratic Party, the African American female, and she asked me, could I go in her stead? And that's how I got there.
Alhamdulillah. Good.
That's how I got there. So anyway, but I did tell I sent a message out to the African American Caucus that we should not, and I thoroughly enjoyed the event. We should not let events like that happen where we don't have a presence in that. And I talked to the organizer. I said, as a leader of this effort, I assure you, whenever you do something, let me know. Then either I will come or I will try to bring 4 or 5 caucus members with me. And if every organization, African American organization, did that, it would move this. It would serve to bring more unity and move away from the mentality that I can't support you because it would take away from my from my leadership or whatever. That's selfish stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We got to all make a strong effort that we support each other's events. So what the Caucasian sees and the Negroes that are working for the Caucasians' best interests, what they see will be unity and not division. So we'll see how that
Excellent.
works out.
Excellent. So it is it's about 12 minutes until the hour.
Wow.
So I want to build on, Adam, what you just, well, okay, I'm going to make the assumption that this builds on what you just spoke about.
Okay.
There's another YouTube video in the chat that I would like for you to play, and it's about the rebranding of the Democratic Party. Now, I'm going to tell you, I have not listened to it, but I know the speaker, and I know how strongly entrenched he is in
Sure comes from Adobe.
progressive democratic values.
Okay.
And he's a businessman who understands economics.
All right. So I'm trying to get it queued up.
Okay.
Hold on a second.
And I apologize beforehand for any of Scott's language, because he does come with both barrels blazing.
And that's something that everybody's using a curse word.
Yeah, they need to stop.
Everybody.
There's easier ways to get your message across than have to use that language.
They're thinking that the audience is dumb. Well, maybe they are. I don't know. Maybe the audience they think they need to hear that kind of stuff.
The audience needs to be elevated.
But they're trying to come down to the audience level. That's
I know.
Yeah. All right. See if I can get it. There you go.
Express. These days, there are a million different ways to reach your customers, but that can also mean a million different pieces of content. It can be overwhelming. Adobe Express can help with templates, brand kits, and generative AI that's safe for business. Your team can create its own content and will always be polished and professional. When everyone can create content themselves, it's easier to get on-brand content out in the world faster. Go from cookie cutter to class of its own. Switch to the quick and easy app to create on-brand content, Adobe Express. Learn more at adobe.com/express/business. True story. I have used Adobe Express and I was shocked how easy it is to use and produce content. Welcome to Office Hours with Prof G. Today we're finishing off our special 3-part series, Prof G on Marketing, where we answer questions from business leaders about the biggest marketing challenges and opportunities companies face today. What a thrill! Question number 1. Our first question comes from Dan Weil on Instagram. They ask,
what lessons from marketing can the average person use in their day-to-day life?
Basis of marketing is, all right, how do I create a product after identifying a market and a need? And so I think essentially my most popular session in my course is the brand you, and that is trying to think of yourself as a brand. It just shocks me how many people spend their entire lives in brand management thinking about every component and touch point of a product or service to create intangible associations or a brand. Brand is emotion. Brand are intangibles such that you get kind of unfair advantage, right? And then they don't think about what their brand is. So think about what is your market, right? Are you in the market to find a job in accounting? And then think, okay, how do I create a product, me, that attracts or is very attractive to the market of potential employers in accounting? Is it certification? Is it a CFA? Is it the way I dress, looking very orderly? Is it having knowledge, specific knowledge about a very deep niche in accounting? Is it beginning to create content around accounting such that people notice me? It's figuring out what is your market, like in the mating market, in the professional market. What do you want to achieve? What's the market for getting that level of achievement? And then reverse engineering to what certification, character attributes, physical appearance, activities, and behaviors will in fact make you most attractive to your potential market. And being really strategic about it, right? Being really kind of thoughtful about it. What is, I want to appeal to thought leaders, I want to have a lot of influence, and I want to appeal to young men. But I did a little bit more analysis. What I really want to appeal to is I want to appeal to young men, and I want to appeal to their moms. And the way I appeal to young men is I start thinking about, okay, young men are very focused on finance and economic security. They also, I think, they're the white space for young men, and straight men, quite frankly, is to be more emotive and more vulnerable. So I talk about stuff that's a little bit uncomfortable. I'm also irreverent and profane. Now, some of that is authentic because I am a profane and vulgar person, but quite frankly, some of it is marketing because I want, I'm an older dude, so to resonate with younger people, I do think they like a guy or are attracted to a product that is a little bit irreverent, a little bit fearless, and quite frankly, funny. So marketing isn't finding consumers for your product. It's figuring out what market you want to go after and then reverse engineering to yourself and saying, how do I become the best product that market can't resist is more attractive to that market? Who are you? What's your core value proposition? What do you want to be known for reputationally? And then how do you, the way you behave, the way you dress, the certifications you get, the characteristics you attribute, how do you reinforce that association and that brand such that you create such a strong brand that when people are faced with a myriad of decisions around who they hire, who they hang out with, who they mate with, they decide to look at the shelf and they pick you. Question number 2. Our next question comes from Threads. Lee asks,
as a professional artist, we are told that we can never look like we are marketing, yet we must market to make sales. How do we do that?
Oh my God, you want to talk about an industry that is so full of shit, that is so all marketing. I mean, literally, okay, I'm sure there's 0.001% of artists are so fucking brilliant that their work itself just breaks through. Folks, get over yourself. If you're not willing to be a total whore and go to openings and meet people and be on Instagram and totally pimp if you don't feel like you need to shower every day because you've done so much whoring of yourself and your work, then just expect to be a struggling artist that eventually digresses into some sort of substance abuse and is poor the rest of your life. I don't think I can think of an industry that is more marketing than art. I mean, it's creating this illusion and this character and why you're so in. My piece of art, I have basically, what do I have? I have 2 pieces of art, literally only 2. One is a picture of Otto Frank returning to the basement where he and his family hung out, and that has real meaning for me. And then whenever I feel sorry for myself, which is one of the many things I hate about myself, given my blessings, I go look at that photo and boom, I stop feeling sorry for myself. The second piece of art I own is this thing. It's called Map for a Politician, and it's by a guy named Graceline Community. And it's an etching, and it's beautiful, and it's very political, and it kind of speaks to me. It means a lot to me because I went with someone I care a great deal about when I was in Istanbul with her, said, I think you'd really like this artist, and he's having an exhibition in Istanbul, and we went, and I loved it. And then she bought me a piece. And I think it's probably the most valuable physical thing I own, or at least most valuable to me. And one of the things I love about it, and I just was so intrigued, is this guy, Graceline Community, lives half the year as a man and half as a woman. Anyways, I found that just super cool, and I found him fascinating. I learned more about him. And yeah, I bought the piece, but what I was really buying was a small piece of Graceline Community because I was just fascinated with the artist. So your ability to market yourself, go to stuff, get awareness, get pictures of your shit out on social media, I think it's everything, or nearly everything. So if you're banking on the fact that you're 0.0001% of artists, yeah, have at it. And if you believe that, guess what? You know what's really going to bum you out is people who are less talented than you are going to make a lot more money and get a lot more relevance because they did the hard part, and that is they got out a big spoon and they ate shit. They marketed themselves. So, of course, this is an industry that's huge around marketing. I immediately go to social, but I think it's being social media, but I also think it's being very social, going to a bunch of stuff. I can't tell you how to do this, but quite frankly, I think being quirky in the art field or being really standing out in terms of the way you dress, you are your own brand, is really important. And just meeting with as many people as possible. I think this is the ultimate sales and marketing industry, and that is, what is art? It's 49% the art, and it's 51% marketing. Get over yourself. Start marketing. All right, we'll be right back after a quick break. Support for this show comes from Adobe Express. With social media, email, and a growing variety of online ads, there are more touch points than ever between your business and its customers. Adobe Express is here to make sure your smallest touch point is as polished, impactful, and on brand as the biggest. The brand kits in Express make following design rules a breeze. Templates for flyers, banners, emails, social posts, and more have all the professional quality Adobe is known for. And generative AI that's safe for business gives everyone the ability to make images, rewrite texts, and produce effects using simple text prompts. You can create campaigns, resize ads with a click, and even translate content automatically. Work that used to take weeks now takes minutes or even seconds. Adobe Express also makes collaboration, approval, and sharing easier so any team can become a well-oiled content machine. And if you're leading your team, you can monitor it all from your admin console. That means you have one centralized place where you can ensure that every asset is right and that everyone is synced. Go from fragmented to business-friendly. Switch to the quick and easy app to create on-brand content, Adobe Express. Learn more at adobe.com/express/business. True story, I've actually used Adobe Express, and I was genuinely impressed with how easy it is to create professional content that you can immediately push out.
Fox Creative.
This is advertiser content from Adobe. As the head of marketing for a big box retailer, I track a lot of moving parts. In addition to our online presence, we have hundreds of locations in dozens of countries. We're about to launch a full refresh of our brand. The new look and feel is a lot bolder and brighter. With all of the changes, our teams still need to create content fast and follow the new brand guidelines. That's why I chose Adobe Express.
For members of the marketing team like me, this brand refresh means we have to work together to create a ton of content for different channels. We need to be consistent, but also fast and flexible. Adobe Express has us covered. Generative AI that's safe for business lets us create new content in seconds. Brand kits let us centralize our design assets so we can always access or share the latest and greatest. Collaborating with my team members has never been easier. And you know what? We're having more fun too.
Adobe Express, the quick and easy app to create on-brand content. Learn more at adobe.com/express/business.
Welcome back. Our final question comes from VoidDeer1234 on Reddit. They ask,
if a new alternative party were to emerge in the USA that was centrist in nature, how would Scott package the brand? Name, messaging, media tactics, etc.?
It's an interesting question, and it's a question that's relevant to me. I'm friends with Andrew Yang, who wanted to start something called the Forward Party and asked me to get involved, and I'm basically very cynical on third parties. I don't think they work. I think everyone has an idea. Remember Howard Schultz? He decided he was going to run as an independent. God, that was stupid. I'm a billionaire, and I built an amazing coffee company, so I should lead the nation. Okay, that makes sense. Anyways, the question for me is, if the Democratic Party is going to reinvent itself and become the new third party or a more robust party, what would it look like? I think in general, Democrats or this new third party you're talking about need to be less focused on trying to acquire social status and studying to a purity test around an orthodoxy of what your political party is supposed to represent for society and lecturing at people and trying to be social engineers or evangelists of an orthodoxy, and focus on the following. How can government and the platform that is the United States provide more emotional and material success for people? That's it. How can we give people, young people, a sense of purpose through national service, through good schooling, through opportunities to meet and mate? And then how can we implement a series of policies that fill in the gaps such that young people can have a reasonable shot, more than a reasonable shot, a probable shot at achieving what is the most rewarding thing in the world, and that is finding someone to fall in love with and having a certain level of prosperity where you can raise your kids, take a vacation, not worry about health care. 40% of American households have medical debt. What does that mean? We need a party that gets very serious about stopping lobbying and ensuring that Ozempic and Humira don't cost 8 times more than what people in other nations pay for it. Think about how outrageous it is that we pay more for pharmaceuticals than any other nation despite the fact that we invent them. So I think that this new party would have to be focused on what I call a unifying theory of everything, and that is anyone under the age of 40 should have the path, the trajectory, and the infrastructure to find someone to fall in love with, more third places, more sports leagues, more churches, more nonprofits, mandatory national service so we can meet people from different ethnicities, different economic backgrounds, different sexual orientations and find out, you know what? I may not agree with your politics. I may not like you. Whatever, but you know what? I have a bond with you. Why? Because this is what we have in common. We're Americans. We need to lower taxes on young people such that they have more of a shot at getting housing. Let's talk about housing. 7 million manufactured homes in the next 10 years. Little cool communities with young people. They pop up their cool coffee shops and their cool cultural institutions, and we massively bring down the cost of housing. Federal legislation that does away with this NIMBYism, such that we have more housing and people can actually afford a fucking house. $25 an hour minimum wage. If it had just kept pace with productivity or inflation, it'd be at $23. But small businesses would go out of business. No, they wouldn't. Minimum wage programs in Washington State and California have resulted in economic growth. Why? Because the wonderful thing about poor and middle-income households is they spend all their money creating a multiplier effect. The economy actually gets a stimulus. All of these things could be done. We need leadership. We need data-driven government that is willing to stand up to special interest groups, that stops this ridiculous transfer of money from young to old. For the first time, a 30-year-old isn't doing as well as his or her parents were in 250 years. That means America isn't working. So here is the unifying theory of everything for your new party. Anyone under the age of 40 should have an obvious illuminant path where they can meet someone, fall in love, have a reasonable lifestyle, have a house, and afford to have children and feel good about America. That's it. Not that hard. We've fucked it all up. We can unfuck it. That's your third party. That's all for this episode. If you'd like to submit a question, please email a voice recording to officehours@prop2media.com. That's officehours@prop2media.com. Or if you prefer to ask on Reddit, just post your question on the Scott Galloway subreddit, and we just might feature it in an upcoming episode. Oh, God, that's exciting. Support for the show comes from Adobe Express. With Adobe Express,
Thanks,
you don't need a degree in graphic design.
And again, I apologize for the language, folks. I'm old enough to take it because he makes some good points from time to time, but he just needs to clean his mouth up a little bit. Thoughts and observations?
If everybody respected the rights of everybody else, then it would be easier to get to where he suggested. But it's going to be hard now because you have interests in America that want to turn America away from democracy into an oligarchy. Or an autocratic society. And that's the fight. That's the fight right now. If more people thought, if more people understood and know what's being done to America, they would be up in arms. I was thinking yesterday, this country was formed because we didn't want a king, right?
Right.
We didn't want King George to rule, so the founding fathers rebelled against it. So why would we want a king now? We fought against that. The first one, we need to fight against the second one. But they divided America so much that you got a whole bunch of Americans that identify as MAGA that thinks he's doing it for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem right now.
So during the time of the American Revolution, there was probably somewhere between 40 and 60% of the population of the colonies that were against the revolution.
They were about what?
That they were 40 to 60% of the colonists were against the revolution. They were satisfied with the status quo. They had been so lulled to sleep that, you know, Boston Tea Party, what's Boston Tea Party? Of course, they didn't have media like we have today, right? For expressing ideas and showing what's going on in this part of the country and that part of the country. It took a while for news to travel to people. But most people were fairly complacent in their lifestyle and weren't caught up in the abuses that the British government was placing on the colonies. Didn't feel it. Didn't interact enough to understand what was going on. I don't know if they would have changed if they had actually got the news or understood what was going on. But, you know, the truth is that it was probably 50-50 of people that were fed up and people that were like, you know, it doesn't affect me. You know, what's been going on is fine. My life is good. That type of thing. So you're always going to have a certain level of complacency.
Right.
One of the things that people like Galloway talk about is younger people and people 40 and under, and whether or not they understand what's being done to them. How this transfer of wealth, and we're about to have another huge transfer of wealth from younger people to older people with this deficit, that if this bill passes anywhere close to the form that it's in, the amount of deficit spending in this bill is going to so burden my two sons that they need 4 arms and 3 shovels just to start digging themselves out from under. They'll be fighting that their entire life, the rest of their life. Both of them recognize it now. Both of them are smart enough to get into the data and they understand the shift. You know, and I tell them it's not, you know, I voted I voted for myself. What can I tell you? I mean, I didn't mean to hurt you guys, but I wanted lower taxes on me. And I wanted more government benefits and different things for me. I wanted tax breaks on things I was doing, and I wanted to kick the can down the road. I'm guilty. But I don't think a lot of them understand, or enough of them understand, that there has to be a rebalancing of the equation. I think a lot of older people like me, I know there needs to be a rebalancing. I don't know how much it's going to hurt me if it happens. I know I feel a little pain, but it has to happen. And it has to happen like what you were talking about justice. There's never been a balance of justice in the United States. It's never existed. There's always been the promise of it, the thought of it, people talking about it. It's never happened. It's absolutely never happened. And it's definitely not happening now. They're letting every criminal you can think of out of jail. Every fraudster, every enemy of the people, they're all getting out of jail. And all the law, everything, all these consent decrees and everything that were put in place to protect all of us, no matter what your race or social status or whatever, they're being destroyed. from the redlining. I think I may have sent that to a couple of people. You know, huge redlining consent decree. I forget which bank it was, but a huge bank in the Midwest. And yeah, they don't have to abide by that anymore. And that's not going to be the end of it. If they don't have to abide by it, everybody else is going to have their lobbyist lawyers out there saying, you know, wait, can we get ours, you know, dissolved as well? I mean, we didn't do anything any worse than what they did. You know, if theirs isn't redlining, can't call us redlining. You know, we're just making business decisions. So all of these things are happening while people are wandering around somewhat in a daze. Open banking being attacked. So you have all the information on what's going on with your accounts and your ability to, you know, be able to very easily shift your account somewhere else if you can get better interest rates and things like that. That's under attack. Anything that would profit you if you're an intelligent, engaged, I would say middle class American citizen, especially, is under attack. And if you're a person of color, yeah, you need your ears need to perk up, all your senses need to be on high alert.
But see, that's part of the scam. You understand? They're taking all the gains that we made to have a government, federal government, that protects certain things. They're removing all those things. And they make us the poster child, or they make the immigrants the poster child, or they make the LGBT community the poster child. And they have people focusing on those groups while they're doing the things you're talking about. To the average American, irregardless of what group he comes from, or he or she might come from. That's what authoritarianism is all about. That's what the oligarchy is all about. You understand?
Oh, I do. I get it.
And they're doing it. Say like right now in North Carolina, the Republicans in Raleigh are trying to put the powers that the governor had, that the executive branch have, and they're putting it in the hands of who is away from the governor to I forgot what position that they just happen to control, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the governor doesn't have as much power as they used to have. They're doing that, right? So you had one Democrat that voted along with the majority, who just happened to live in Cumberland County. Back in the last fall, he voted initially to penalize African American youth, to put charges on them. He voted for that. Then, when the cover of Light came on, and he was one of the 5 Democrats across North Carolina that voted for it, he changed his vote. Now, he just happened to live in a district where 52% of his constituents are African American. So I said, well, I sent word to him that, hey, I wanted to take him out to lunch. So me and another member of the African American caucus took him to lunch. Right. And because he had said when the light came on, he wanted to do some damage control. He realized he messed up. We got exposed. So I asked him, I said, man, I live in your district. Before you represent and vote for stuff like that, why don't you come and ask for advice from your constituents before you do it on your own? That way you won't have to come and tell me you got to do damage control. That'll help you keep you from doing damage. And he agreed. He said in the future he wanted to come to the Black Caucus meeting sometime and speak. Well, I said, great, do that. Now I just found out yesterday at that event that he did that to remove power from the governor. I'm not going to take him to lunch this time. Not literally, but I'm hoping we can take him to lunch and get him out of that seat. You see what I'm saying?
I do.
He's supposed to be a Democrat. But he got rewarded by the Republicans. They gave him they put him on a good committee, and they gave him a nice office there. So he ain't even trying to hide it no more. So those are the kind of things that when I'm saying they make us the poster child of what they're trying to do. And the dumb Caucasians, the MAGAs, and the Negro hirelings think that everything is all right, and they give them more license to do that. So that's what we had to do. I mean, I like what my man said. I like, hey, I'm a fan of Bernie Sanders. But the reality is that you have people in both parties that are grounded in that system that really don't want that system to change.
Right. Then, part of our efforts then have to be to move away, not totally, obviously, you still have to have the interaction with your political representatives. But our movement has to be toward engaging, listening to, being educated by, and educating younger people who are going to be directly affected by this for a much longer period of time than some of us. They've got to come to the realization of what is happening to them, not just socially and politically, but what's going to happen to them economically if they're, some of these policies are not arrested, and we actually start putting policies in place that favor the type of growth that is going to give them the life that Scott talked about, where they can get married, where they can buy a home, where they can raise children.
But
we got to engage.
If they don't vote,
that's what I'm saying. That's why we've got to go light a fire under them.
That's it.
Not just to vote, because voting is a start. So once you vote somebody into office, and God, I've seen it happen. I saw it happen right here in Dallas and North Texas. Is you vote somebody into office, and they get so entrenched in office, just like your politician that you spoke of, they forget the people. It all becomes about them. And if you're not constantly on your representative's case and reminding them why they're there, why they got elected, and what you want them to represent to help move your community forward, your state, your region, whatever forward, they're just up there, eating, finger sandwiches, drinking champagne, and toasting each other.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And talking about committee assignments and the new office they got in the whatever building that they're in up there in DC, or it could be your state capital, wherever they are there, right? And we get lackadaisical. And we get lackadaisical because maybe for a moment, for a year, for 2 years, for 3 years, our little situation is comfortable. But whatever they're doing is working for me. We don't keep our finger on it. And our younger people, I know they're for a large part, they're really disgusted with us. They're really, because we sold them a future that hasn't materialized.
Oh,
We walk around patting each other on the back.
Yeah,
Until now, when all the stuff that we didn't work hard enough to get totally ingrained starts being taken away from us, and now we start to panic a little bit too. They've seen it. They, kind of like, man, mom and dad, and grandpa and grandma, what'd you do? What are you doing?
Well, first of all, half of the young people ain't built nothing at all. So, like I told some young brothers that thought they had it going on, I said, show me what you built. They ain't built nothing. So until you produce, or what do you have coming down the pike in the next 5 years? Nothing. They just tune out. So it's sins of, I agree, it's sins of the current adults, right? That come into play. Now here's what our Black Caucus is. These are some of the steps that we talked about actively safeguarding democracy, and some things you talked about, Edward. One is voting. If you can't vote nobody in, you ain't gonna do nothing. Two is staying informed. Get informed and stay informed. Three is engaging in civic discourse, discussions, debates, open dialogue. Four is holding leaders accountable, which is what we're gonna do. No, well, I can't say the guy I talked about. We didn't hold him accountable, so he's got to go. Defending rights and freedoms, volunteering and community engagement, and lastly, promoting education. That's what we've come up that we got to get involved in order to capture and get young people to vote and grooming them for the future and all this other stuff. And that's the problem. We don't have that. And our problem is, and I said it again yesterday. It's something how the Caucasian can find African American candidates. We can't find African American candidates. But every term they find one or two or three, and they encourage them to run for office. I was talking to a sister yesterday, was trying to run for county commissioner the last time. And she admitted to me that the guy that she told me about, the politician we talked about, this white Democrat that voted with Republicans, that he came and got her and encouraged her to run for office. And she ran based on that encouragement. So they can find an African American to run much quicker than we can. And every term, they got a guy now running for mayor. I ain't never heard from the brother. I don't even know who he is. But I guarantee you, when I look down the list, he went to North Carolina A&T, right? Then he got a graduate degree from, guess what? Liberty University.
Okay.
Y'all heard,
Yeah.
y'all
All
heard of
right.
Liberty?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
the Negroes I know that went to Liberty, they definitely got the Caucasian that moved to his mind.
Yeah. Those are the ones. Those are the ones that put dynamite in the Underground Railroad.
Right, right. So the Caucasian can find them Negroes to run for every time, but we can't. Oh, anyway, I'm sorry.
Well, no, I mean everything you just said is true, and I love that. What was it, a 7 or 8 point um, plan that you guys have? Those touch points.
Mm-hmm.
Those are dead on. I mean, those are, as far as touch points go, those are some of the major touch points that we have to address, and not just in a political sense. That's a community sense.
Right.
All of those things have to be touched on, and you add that because those are things that everybody I think can understand and get their head around without having to drill way down. There are going to be some people that when you actually start getting into the data, the real numbers, they tune out because they can't get it. It's too much for their head. As a friend of mine used to say, I get a headache. I don't want to hear that stuff. They like the big picture, and the data drives them crazy. But there's some data points, some deep data points that have to come along and back that up if we are going to have communities that are sustainable. And Scott did touch on a couple of those. One of them I totally agree with him on, though my numbers are higher when he was talking about $25 an hour minimum wage. I think it should be probably more than 27 to $32 an hour minimum wage. If you just go back to 1969 and look at cost of living, look at income levels then, and build from there, you're going to end up somewhere, depending on the region of the country, obviously. Some places are less expensive. You're going to end up somewhere between 27 and $32 an hour just to be at the same level that people were living at in 1969. The other thing, and we touched on it on Collective Conversations when Imam Bobby was on with us. I really and truly do believe that there have been enough upgrades and continuing upgrades in manufactured housing that you can roll out $150,000, $160,000 3-bedroom, 2-bath manufactured homes built on about a 1,600 to 1,800 square foot platform, and they're going to exceed what he was talking about as far as lifetime expectancy of how long that structure should last, how long you can properly insure it, and all that stuff without it actually losing value. I think they'll maintain that. There've been some incredible upgrades in that. And that type of housing, whether it is done as housing for purchase, mortgage, or rental housing, would give a lot of young people an opportunity to be in a home with a spouse and children, and not be stressed economically. So, I mean, I think those are things that have to be, when you get all of those touch points that you mentioned, and then behind that, you start putting in place some very specific things to start helping people at a granular level to live better lives and have higher aspirations and expectations. Then maybe you start to move people toward even more civic involvement, more voting, more staying concerned, more willingness to work in the community to make the community better and things like that. It has to be a shift in the mindset of people. And that shift has to be sustainable. Imam Talib, come on with that white man's eyes. Tell me what you're talking about.
Well, let me say this. It was in response to Adam's comment about the sister who is, I think he said she's running for office now. But it was or I think the gist of what Adam was saying was why we can't go to our own people and encourage them to run, but when the white man does, we do. And it just reminded me, of that phrase that, we are still dependent on them. We still look for approval from them, because we are not as free as we think we are. I mean, Adam quoted it from Ibrahim Toure that, that all they did was just moved into our head. They moved into our mind. They moved into our way of thinking. And the only thing that should be saving us is Quran and Sunnah. I mean, so as I was listening to the first video that you were playing about I don't know, what was it, like autonomous cars that don't have drivers?
Yeah, the Waymo.
Right. So this is what I just put in the chat while you all were talking. I just turned to Quran in thinking about that. And this is just a quick interpretation of the 96 surah, where and we talked about, I think we talked about this last week. What is missing in the human intellect is that disconnection, because now we're dependent on technology. And when I heard what the woman was saying about this autonomous vehicle, my first thought that came to mind was, was a disconnection. I mean, I even wrote the word down and then turned to the Quran, and this is what I find. And there's more. And I mean, I would encourage us to read or to reread that 96 surah, but with an eye for the things that we are talking about. What I can't figure out, what I see as, I guess, what they call the writing on the wall, is that we are in the throes of, I don't really know what the right word is here, but you mentioned earlier about during the Revolutionary War, I think you said there were like 40, maybe as much as 50% of the people that didn't necessarily agree. And there might have been just as many that didn't even know a war was going on. But I do agree with that, because there's historical evidence to show in this particular region where I live, there was a prominent family that was here from England. Their last name was Claggett, Clagett. When the Revolutionary War broke out, the family split. And in order to show their allegiance to King George, you will now find Clagett's with 2 G's, because George had 2 G's. And they wanted to show their allegiance to the king. So I believe that. But what I also believe is that we are, and probably always have been, I'd have to look or go back to see, like, I guess what you could call a starting date. And maybe I'll discover that it never ended. But we are in the throes of another civil war, of another revolution, where we're going to have to decide whose side we on. And I believe that many of us on this call right now, should Allah allow us to live a long life, including myself, we're going to see it. We're going to see we're going to see it manifest itself. Because I've always believed, even before I became Muslim, I always believed that there was nothing new under the sun. That if you don't learn from history, you're going to repeat it. And we're seeing that right now. I mean, and whether you recognize it, and trust me, I don't recognize everything. Edward, you were saying some things that I'm not even aware of, because I haven't been paying any attention to it. So I think you mentioned something about this new bill that's should it pass, how it's going to, I'm assuming it's going to hurt everybody, but a certain group of people. And you mentioned something about a banking system where people are being, or where people transferring from different banks trying to get better rates and things of that nature. Were you saying they're going to put a stop to that, or that's being monitored?
The Trump administration is basically, because they now pretty much control the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. They are pushing for the end to what is called open banking. Open banking is one of the things that allows a lot of these fintech companies and some financial institutions that have been created just for the sake of, say, paying high interest on savings accounts and things of that nature. So the reason that you have that information, and the reason that you have the ability to very quickly switch money into those types of accounts, like if you're got savings is getting 1.25%, you want to get 5%, you can do that with just a few clicks of your mouse today. That wasn't always the case. You didn't always have that ability, but open banking allows that. It allows you to shift back and forth. There's no penalties for moving your money or anything of that nature. They want to somewhat shut that down, because that helps middle class and lower income people way too much, and it hurts the oligarch class, which need to be able to they need to know how much money they have to play with on the stock market, which means that the monetary supply that they borrow from, that's like tied to their institution, stays stable all the time, so that they know how much they can short, how much they can loan, and how much they can borrow, and all those things. So your ability, my ability, and your ability to move our money to where it best suits us hurts them. They don't like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Now, so and this is, so there was a part of that, and this is what I mean when I say I filter all of these through Quran and Sunnah. I could care less about that, because where I have my money saved, I'm not looking for the highest interest rate as a Muslim. I just need my money for emergencies. I need, and rather than saving it, I'm looking for ways to use it, to spend it, but also have some reserves in order to protect my family, to maintain, my properties. I mean, in other words, to take care of my business. So some of this, I wouldn't even tell you I've been ignoring. Some of it doesn't interest me, but I'm thankful to Allah for someone like yourself, that keeps up with this, because what you represent, to, at least to me, I'm assuming to us, is a certain level of knowledge that either I don't have or I don't have any interest in. But it doesn't diminish what it is that you know, and I would encourage you to keep on telling us about it, because it's going to help me to understand and explains why this system of capitalism is based on corruption, and it's based on greed, and it's based on you making sure that you have more than me. There's no equality there. I want to have more toys in the sandbox than you do. And if you want to use one of my toys, you're going to have to pay me for it. So, I mean, I've always considered myself to be one who bucks the system. There's not a lot like me, but it's allowed me to achieve a certain level of success that leaves me, if nothing else, it leads me to conclude that I'm a legend in my own mind. And that's okay with me, because it has served me well. I'm trying to figure out how to bottle it and sell it to others, because what I'm seeing, I don't like. I mean, anytime you've got me wanting, and not just me, but anytime I have a family of of that wants to go to the gun range, not just to own a firearm, but to know how to use it. Why should I be thinking like that?
Because you realize the true world that you live in.
Yeah, I mean,
you have looked beyond the sugary coating on the top into what's actually in the cake, and you're
right.
not pleased with what you find in the cake.
Right.
Right.
That's a good analogy. Yes, sir.
It looks
That's right.
it looks pretty on top, tasty.
Yes, it does.
But that's all fake.
Yeah, I'm in America, and as I look around the world, I can see that we are doing far better.
Yes.
Far, far better than anyone in Sudan, in Palestine, in Gaza.
In Kenya,
yes.
in Uganda,
anywhere,
in Democratic Republic of Congo, in Liberia, in Ghana, in Nigeria,
yes, sir.
in Senegal, in
yep.
Mali. I could go on and on.
Right. Exactly.
They are living in the kind of hell we can't even imagine.
Right. That's right. But what I'm working on, or what we should be working on, is avoiding that. Right. You know, we gotta. In fact, I'm going to be addressing this on a local level. But we got a situation here in Washington, D.C., where I cut off the water to a woman's house who could no longer afford to be paying utilities on a home where she wasn't living. Cut off her electric, cut off her gas, cut off her water. She doesn't live in the house anymore. Been out of there for maybe a little over a year.
Let me stop you real quick. Let me see if the municipality is going to try to make her have utilities to that place.
Well, no, they're not making her have utilities.
Okay.
What they're doing is she still gets a water bill because the city has allowed this authority to be able to establish something they call the Clean Rivers Act, that is roughly $37 a month on everyone's bill, whether you have water on or not. Order, that's your contribution to separating the city's sewer system from the stormwater system.
Okay.
All right. So, I mean, you know, if you don't really understand the engineering process of
oh, I do.
Of drainage.
And I'm surprised. I wish Omar was here because he could even tell us more about that stuff. But go ahead.
Right. But this was, even though I knew about this, it just kind of smacked me in the face, because because when I look back now, because she wasn't in the house, that's all the water she was paying for. Was that tax. And so now I've got to rethink this situation, and I may do nothing at all, because the house is upside down. She's out of it. You know, HUD is taking their sweet time about taking it over, but
they don't want to pay the $37 a month.
Well, I mean, hell, for that matter, you know, she's no longer paying the taxes,
right?
The real estate taxes on the property, and eventually, it's going to go up for tax sale. Okay, and you know, at this particular point, you know, she's not able to afford the expenses on the home because, HUD expects for her to keep the insurance up on the house, maintenance
Right.
up on the house, as if she's living there,
Right.
and they want, and as near as
Tip,
I'm able to tell, they want her to keep doing that until they decide to take over the house.
Typically, it is against the law in most municipalities, larger places, obviously cities. I'm not sure about small towns and stuff like that, but usually if you have a structure that you own, you are required obviously to pay the property taxes. That doesn't go away until you no longer truly own the property. And
Right.
you're typically required to have insurance on that property.
Right.
Most people, when they move out of a property, like if they are walking away from it, they're not paying an insurance bill.
Right.
So that usually ends up in some kind of litigation with the state or county or however they do that. And most people end up not having to pay that. But it can remain as a judgment against you, and it just depends on District of Columbia is unique unto itself. I don't even begin to know how government works there, but in Texas, Texas would try to recover it, or the federal government, in case it's a HUD house, would try to recover it by snatching your tax refunds, things of that nature, right? That's what they would do.
Right.
But I mean, you probably, other than that, you're not going to have to. She would not have to come out of pocket because of the insurance policy.
Look, but one of the early lessons my father taught me is that you can't get blood from a turnip.
There you go. we've got just a few minutes before noon in the East and 11 o'clock for me. Adam, there is another video. And I only thought of this video because of Imam Talib. So this one's not my fault. This one's Imam Talib's fault.
Well, let us have it, and then I'm gonna have to go because I'm expecting someone. I'm expecting someone shortly.
So Adam, if you can cue this up, I don't think it's very long. Is Adam still?
Yeah,
you see it? You see it in the chat?
Yeah, man, I think it's 46 minutes long, man.
Oh, we're only going to do a few minutes of it then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I mean, let's say in like next 10 minutes we're gone. Okay, so if they're not saying anything in the first 10 minutes, we're just going to miss them.
All right. Hold on a second.
Just fixating on the problems. And there is no more urgent problem facing our nation today than the dangers that come downstream from hyperpartisanship and polarization, the undermining of civil society, the ratcheting up of resentment. And our guest today is a distinguished gentleman named John Paul Lederach. He's a professor emeritus at Notre Dame University, but more importantly, he is one of the pioneers of the field of peace building. He has been engaged in conflict resolution across the world for the better part of 40 years and has brought his experience to bear in 30 books, which he has either written or contributed to. Most recently, a book called A Pocket Guide to Facing Down a Civil War. And yes, he's talking to us here in America. John Paul Lederach, it's an honor to talk with you.
Well, thank you, John. It's great to be with your show, so I appreciate it.
And I should say that you were, when I was writing Lincoln in the Fight for Peace, you were one of the people I spoke to a lot about conflict transformation and the kind of leadership that's necessary for those circumstances when a nation is in civil war, as we were, of course, in the early 1860s. You have a lifetime of experience, and that you've brought to bear and distilled in this book, which I highly recommend. I want to get to some of the precepts, some of the prescriptions that you've found useful. But before we do, let's just deal with the open question. In your experience, are you seeing some of the cultivation of destructive forces that has led to civil wars in other countries here in the United States?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. It's one that I get quite often. One way to answer that is that we often imagine the United States as having a certain level of exceptionalism. And what I say is that we may be exceptional, but we're not exempt from the patterns that can get unleashed. And those take different forms and at different paces. I don't think that the image that most of us have here in the US of civil war, when we think about our own history, is likely to be the scenario. That is, big blocks of geography separating out in sort of massive, militarized fighting back and forth between those regions. It's much more likely to be the patterns of evolving forms where we cross that line from that toxic polarization into the justification of violence against people that we feel are threatening our survival. And that, I think, has a lot of patterns that have already been present for quite some time. And the question is, can we truly come back to our basic social contract of believing, in the whole notion that it is possible to do politics with great difference and diversity without violence? And I think that requires both leadership, but it also requires a whole web of work at the level of where we live, the places that we carry out our daily lives and how we deal with the differences that we find in so many parts of this country. You can't run away from our differences, actually. There's no notion that there's an easy place to divide out a majority that would be vastly majority and everybody else can just leave. That sort of thing just isn't there. In no place in the world you can go, actually, where you get away from needing to deal with difference. And the question is, can we do it without violence? And I think that's our big challenge.
And that is the challenge. I want to disabuse anybody. I mean, I've always gotten nauseous when I see people talk breezily about a second civil war, sometimes with a degree of glee or grim inevitability. And to your point, no, it's structurally not going to happen the way that we experienced in the 1860s. But more importantly, we had 750,000 Americans die in that war. So it is nothing to fetishize. But to your point, with your global experience, there are certain dynamics from which we are not immune. And you raise this, but this is one of the many paragraphs I underlined in the book. The key point you say, toxic polarization and violence paralyze politics and destroy trust. Toxic polarization and violence. It's that combination. We've seen a degree of political paralysis, which frustrates people. We've seen certainly trust and empathy eroded, which is itself dangerous. But we have also seen the storming of our Capitol on January 6th and the pardoning of those people by a president who tried to overturn an election. They tried to overturn an election on the back of his lie to his benefit. You mentioned in the book somewhat comfortingly that other countries like Spain have survived attempted storming of parliaments and maintained their democracy. But for me, the danger is that not only is there no accountability, there's been reward for an act of political violence. How dangerous do you think that is? And how did other countries like Spain, just using one example, emerge from a period of storming, an attempt at storming of their parliament to remain very much a growing democracy?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question because you probably wouldn't have known this, but I actually was living in Spain at the time it happened.
No, I didn't know that.
The person coming out of much more of a General Franco's movement and view, occupied that parliament and watched it evolve live on television at the time. And I remember sitting with colleagues who had lived through or very proximate to, were children of the Civil War, if you will. And the absolute shuddering, the fear that brought, that this was going to collapse. And I think it's one of the things that we see again and again in places that have had repeated sets of violence, is that people are always at the edge of whether this will be the thing that unleashes it. But to your point, I think what we saw in Spain was a commitment to two things that are of paramount importance. One was there was a very clear leadership that stood up to those moments in a way that was exemplar to a lot of other people. Adolfo Suarez, for example, was in that body where that happened, and he very much stood straight up and was not one who cowered to that particular moment.
Tell us people who that is.
He was a person who came out of the period of what was the dictatorship to give leadership to the transition period, and then was elected the first. And the major elections led through all of those that took Spain out of a dictatorship and into a new constitution of democracy in Europe. So this is a place that had a long-standing dictatorship coming out of that period of the Spanish Civil War and all of that brought, and for decades was one of the few countries in that region that had that form of governance. So the transition, this is my second point, that transition, if you talk to the people that were close to it, required direct and deliberative dialogue with people who you do not agree with, in fact, have fundamental, deep disagreements with, but you're committed to finding a way through that to another side that actually solidifies the great promise of democracy, which is that people have opportunity to decide for themselves what will happen with their country.
So, I mean, I think we can tell this is going to be a long, drawn out type of thing and not as direct to the point as some of the other things that we had an opportunity to view today. But probably would be interesting in the long run to hear some of the points and things that they talk about. My takeaway from a lot of the stuff that we saw today is that we're, at least in the United States, and I think based on things that are happening in Africa, obviously things that are happening in Asia, that we're in an inflection point in history to where things are going to change rapidly, and people who are not engaged are going to be caught totally unaware of the changes in their world. And it could dramatically affect a lot of people's lives. Always, when I'm talking to my boys, always, when we were talking about changes and preparing and all that type of thing, always send them back to late 18th century France. I think most of us who are here, when we were in school, we had to read Tale of Two Cities, or at least you've heard about the book Tale of Two Cities, or, Let Them Eat Cake, and what the Queen said, and all those things, and the guillotines, and all those things. So we know about all those big moments. One of the underlying things that happened in France in that period of about a 6 or 7 year period of time is they had 8 different constitutions, 8 different forms of government and leadership in about a 6 year period of time. It was so disruptive to community life that it set them back probably 50 to 70 years in a competitive nature. That would not happen today because of technology. Technology allows you to catch up a lot faster than what would have been possible for them back then in the beginning of one of the industrial revolutions. But it's cautionary in that so many people today tend to tune out. And Imam Talib, I appreciate what you said about taking care of your family. It's coming from an Islamic perspective. Taking care of your family is paramount, and the things that happen outside of that they're secondary. And in large part, I agree with that. Another part of Al-Islam says that you're not truly a believer, which is a pretty high standard believer, until you want for your brother, and I'll throw sister in there, what you want for yourself. And I applaud you for saying that you want to, in some way, be able to take your philosophy and what's helped you to be successful and give that to the people. And I would say that when you're ready to do that, if you need help, I'm willing to help you to get that to the people. Because something has to be done. Because the things that we saw, the Waymo, the driverless cars, the airplanes that fly themselves, and all other types of automation and things that are either aided by or completely driven by generational or generative AI. It's just like that cake I was talking about. What they're showing you is the very thin surface. They're not showing you what they already have, what they're already capable of doing. So all those things that we think are going to be 5 or 6 years from now, it could be 18 months, could be 27 months. That's the speed at which this is moving. And our population, people that I love, I mean, I'll just give you one quick example, and then we got to get out of here. My older son, very successful at this, 38 years old. Last Sunday was his birthday, turned 38. Highly successful in his field. He's a college professor. Makes good money. He lives comfortably. All of these things. He does, because of the fact that he studies people and societies. He keeps up with, obviously, decisions that people are making, why they're making those decisions, and how it affects relationships in particular. It's a big part of the studies and labs that they do. And one of the things that he has picked up on is something, and I can't remember who in the conversation, whether it was Adam or yourself or Mom Tyler touched on this, is the relationships between human beings. With the advent of all the technology that we now use, it's at our fingertips, the relationship between human beings is changing, of how we interact with each other. And the relationship with how we view the world and success and what will bring you success and make you happy, whatever that is, that's also changing. And it's changing on a very individual basis, where it used to change somewhat on a group basis. Now it's very individual, which causes even more separation between people. And it leads to a silo effect. My world, your world, their world, those type of things, where as long as I'm safe within my silo and I'm able to build my thing, then I'm okay. And if a rock falls on you over here and crushes you, well, okay, doesn't affect me. To me, that's dangerous. And I've told my sons that. I've told them you can't think like that. That all of your thinking has to be about the whole. Your thinking, your actions, what you do, obviously has to be about better developing yourself and preparing yourself for the future that you want, and your God consciousness. Always throw that in there as well. But the whole of your thinking has to be about everybody and what's best for everybody. And that does make it so that you need to be engaged and that you need to know what's going on all around you at all points on, the 360-degree circle. And I'll stop right there. Imam Talib, will you close us out? I mean, unless anybody has anything else they'd like to add, we can close out.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولس إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر الحمد لله رب العالمين. Hi, folks.
Thank you guys for suffering through my videos today, and hopefully we got something out of it. And thank you, Adam, for co-hosting. And again, happy birthday.
All right, thank you very much, bro.
Yeah, bro. Happy birthday.
Thanks, bro. Alhamdulillah.
Grown ass man, and we still
Finally, he finally made it.
All right, bro. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Martha.
Assalamu alaikum,
And
Sister Khalida, Sister
I didn't
Martha.
see you had joined us too. Alhamdulillah. And please excuse my my sort of loose language there. But
Walaikum assalam.
all right, y'all. Alhamdulillah.